In this video, we're going to go over the best medications for your Crohn's disease. And I know what you're thinking. This guy does not look like a doctor. Why should I listen to him? Why should you listen to your doctor? I went over to 20 different doctors and none of them gave me an intelligent answer for my Crohn's disease. Every time I asked them what the root cause was and how is this medication treating the root cause, they just looked at me like confused. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I tried a bunch of different holistic remedies, modern remedies. Like I tried everything. Like here are my lab studies to tell you that I had inflammation in almost every single part of my gut. And now I eat whatever I want and I don't have any symptoms. And I have tried everything. And I want to share with you what these drugs are actually doing to your body and your gut. And I have helped many people get better from Crohn's when drugs and diets and all sorts of things didn't work. But what you're going to learn in this video today is what are the best drugs for Crohn's disease and like how do they affect the body? How long does it take for these Crohn's medications and drugs to work? What percentage of people see a response from these drugs? These were things that my doctor could not answer. I would sit in the waiting room after paying like hundreds of dollars and driving all the way across an hour across town to go meet with these guys. And they wouldn't even give me like 10 minutes of their time. And I don't even think if I sat with them, they would have been able to answer these questions that I'm going to answer for you today. And you don't even have to leave your chair. What are the side effects of these Crohn's disease drugs? Do I have to take these Crohn's meds forever? Can I stop taking them if I feel better? And what happens if I don't take my meds? I have done all of these things. I've been a human guinea pig trying to figure out what the cause of Crohn's disease and how to get better as fast as possible. And this is what we're going to go over. So the main way I help people get better is with my 13-day protocol, but I'll tell you more about that later. So in order to understand how these drugs affect Crohn's disease, we have to understand what Crohn's disease is. So Crohn's disease was discovered in the 1930s by Dr. Burrell Crohn. And he actually did not want to call it Crohn's disease. He wanted to call it regional ileitis. Now, the ileum, the first part of the word ileitis, ileum is the last part of the small intestine right before it meets the colon. So all this squiggly stuff, you know, we have you eat something, it comes down here, it goes into the stomach, it gets digested, and then it goes into the small intestine and comes into the colon, and then we poop it out. So the ileum is the part, like the second half of the small intestine right here. All right, so regional ileitis. So there's pockets of inflammation in the small intestine. Now, Dr. Burrell Crohn's tested many different things to try to figure out the cause, and he eventually came to the conclusion that it was mainly caused by stress. And a lot of the times, if you ask these people if they were stressed, they wouldn't admit to it. And I wouldn't admit to it either. I was angry all the time. But like when I started addressing the stress, that's when I started getting better. And like this is the first part of one of his books, and like literally the first sentence of his book is like, stomach ulcers are caused by stress. So there's plenty of science to back this up, new and old. But we're not going to talk about that now. You want to talk about medications. And so to really understand how these medications affect your Crohn's disease and affect your gut, you need to understand what's actually happening with Crohn's disease. And Dr. Hammer figured this all out in the 80s and the 90s. He was making these discoveries. So he could look at your brain CT scan and know what state your Crohn's was in and if you had Crohn's or not. And he mapped out every single disease in the brain. It was really cool. You could see it on a brain CT scan. So people with Crohn's disease, if you looked in their brainstem right here, they would have an impact either here or here. If the first part of the small intestine was inflamed, there would be an impact here. If the second part of the small intestine was inflamed, there would be an impact here. If the colon was inflamed, there would be an impact on one of these relays right here, depending on if it was in the first part of the colon, the transverse, or the descending, or the sigmoid. If they had inflammation or something going on there, there would always be impacts in this part of the brain. And you can see he mapped out a bunch of different other conditions as well. And when I looked at my brain CT scan, I have an impact here, and I also have an impact in my colon. So I had things going on all over. I had more than this going on, but this just shows you that like this is actually true. Like this stuff is real. So what happens is it starts after a traumatic event. So let's say somebody's traumatic event is, they're obsessed with American football. Or let's say they're obsessed with soccer, football, soccer. And, they're in the championship game, and then they kick the ball into their own goal. Oh, that was such a stupid, dumb, crappy thing that I did. Now, or I can't absorb that trophy. So Crohn's, it's on the small intestine. The small intestine is what is something I want to absorb, but I can't. I want to absorb the World Cup or the soccer first place trophy, but I can't. And it's not the stress. Oh, I'm stressed out because I'm going to get cut from my soccer team. That's the stressful situation. We need to know the exact traumatic event that turned this conflict into high gear for the brain. So I want to absorb, like, when the traumatic event was either when I kicked the ball into my own net, it was when they were about to hand the trophy to me, but then, some rule, and we got disqualified because, our coach was cheating, or one of our teammates was caught, using physical enhancing drugs, and they took the cup away from us. Like something like that. Or I broke my foot the second I heard the snap of my ankle. Something traumatic happened where I can't absorb this trophy anymore. We need to know that specific traumatic event, that the small intestine will start to develop extra gut cells. On reports, this will be like thickening of the intestinal wall. And then you won't usually have symptoms. If you do have symptoms, it'll be like constipation or something. But most people don't have symptoms during the conflict active phase. Then I promise I'm going to get to medications. But if you don't understand how Crohn's disease actually works, you won't understand how drugs affect this process. So when the conflict gets resolved, maybe the guy is like, you know what? Screw soccer. I don't want to play soccer anymore. And he picks up a new hobby. Maybe that's the resolution. Maybe he gets put on a better team. He gets, drafted by the pros, or he gets to play college football. He gets that acceptance letter, or the coach tells him like, hey, you did a good job. You're actually not that bad. I'm going to put you on first line. You're not going to be on the bench anymore. Something happened to resolve that conflict. When the conflict gets resolved, the body no longer needs these high maintenance gut cells, and the body starts to get rid of them. And that is a bloody, painful process. It doesn't always have to be bloody, but it's usually a painful process. There are bacteria and fungi growing behind the scene, but they're not active during this time. There's lots of people who get SIBO tests and their numbers will be super high, but they won't have any symptoms. But these bacteria become active during this phase, and it helps with the cell removal. And then when the cell removal is done, there is something called the epicrisis or the healing crisis. And like the body, I don't want to get too technical with you guys, but the body needs to squeeze out the edema, squeeze out the water in your tissues and in your brain. The brain not only has the gut been in overdrive this whole time, but also the brain has been in overdrive this whole time. So once all that healing occurs, it has to squeeze out all the trash, I guess we could say. And that's when you get a fever and you feel really, really, really bad. You can feel bad here too, but you usually feel pretty bad here as well. This is when you have the fever. And then after that, the symptoms die down and you slowly go back to normal. Now, that's how it works in a perfect world. Somebody with Crohn's disease is, they get accepted on the soccer team, right? That's resolved the conflict. Then they get Crohn's symptoms, and now they can't play soccer, and now they get kicked off the soccer team. So it's always off and on, off and on, off and on, off and on. And then a lot of times, like the first time that the person experiences that horrible gut pain or they see blood in the toilet, that puts their gut into overdrive again, or like a different part of their gut. Another one of these diseases or these programs opens up as well, and it can turn into this absolute, runaway freight train mess where your gut is getting triggered all of the time. So I just wanted to do like a really quick rundown of this. There are a lot more details. I can go into a lot more details in this, which I do in my 13-day protocol. But let's start talking about the medications. So there's different categories of medicines. You have antibiotics, you have anti-diarrhea medications, you have laxatives for constipations, then you have stimulants, which are the immunosuppressants, the biologics, the anti-inflammatory drugs, and the painkillers, and then you have antidepressants and bile binders. So what do antibiotics do? Now, you're not going to be going to the doctor here. You're fine. You don't experience any symptoms. When you first resolve the conflict and these bacteria and fungi are going to work, taking antibiotics will kill those bacteria and fungi, and it will reduce the symptoms because the bacteria and fungi are helping. The body is also doing a lot of this work too. Now, a lot of people will blame, in the holistic community, they're going to blame antibiotics for their Crohn's disease, but the truth was they had Crohn's disease way before they started taking antibiotics. Honestly, if you just sit down and logically think about it for a second, it's you had Crohn's symptoms before you started taking antibiotics. Come on, get real. So that's essentially what antibiotics do. There's a place, you can argue whether they're good or bad, but they can reduce symptoms to a certain extent when you're here. But if you're here and you're hitting a bunch of PTSD triggers and the conflict's off and on, off and on, off and on, it's going to reduce your symptoms a little bit, but the conflict is still triggering your symptoms the most. Anti-diarrhea medications. So what they do is they slow down the movement of your gut muscles, right? They're like this. And when you have diarrhea, they're like this. To get something, either there's something, diarrhea will happen if there's something something crappy psychologically you want to get rid of, but you can't. Or actually something physical, like there's hot peppers in your gut and you need to diarrhea it out as fast as possible. There's something bad in me. I need to get it out of me as fast as possible. So it might not. So if your gallbladder is going in and out of overdrive and dumping a bunch of bile into your intestines, it's not a good idea to take anti-diarrhea medication because you literally have bile sitting in your intestines, causing more inflammation, causing more damage. And now another thing we need to talk about really quick is what is inflammation? Because we talk about inflammation like it's a bad thing, but if I were to stub my toe would become inflamed. That inflammation is there to heal the injury. Inflammation is the body's response to injury. So we're taking, this takes us into the next group of drugs. We're taking drugs to reduce healing. Where in reality, what we should be doing is not injuring the gut. There's just literally, there's a lot of great things about modern medicine, but logic is not one of them in most cases. So, yeah, if your gallbladder is not going in and out of overdrive, and you just have like normal bile diarrhea is green, stinky, it burns when it comes out. So like you don't want to take anti-diarrhea medication when that stuff is happening. But if you're having normal diarrhea, your body is trying to get rid of like dead flesh. If you're going like 30 times a day, you could take this, but still 30 times a day, your brain is like just like smashing the diarrhea button. Like this should be a short-term Band-Aid while you look for the PTSD triggers from that traumatic event that keeps smashing the diarrhea button. Constipation medications or supplements, they like magnesium, it causes your muscles to relax. So all of the muscles, these chemicals and these anti-diarrhea these constipation medications, they're trying to get the gut muscles to relax so that stuff can just go through. Or they're trying to hit something that like, or what they could be doing is the magnesium opens up your bile ducts and it dumps bile into your intestines, and then your brain's like, well, we need to get this bile out now, and then it tries to flush it out. It's like a hard reset button, these constipation meds. Now, constipation, most of you guys with Crohn's don't have constipation, but with constipation, this is conflict active for what is something I want to hold on to, but I can't. What do I want to hold on to? What, like the gut muscles, they're not just some people will describe the gut muscles as like, my gut is just dead. It's not moving at all. And that's not true. Usually, like near the rectum, the gut muscles are clamped really tight. And then all the other gut muscles expand to hold more stuff, to hold it longer, to suck more nutrients out of whatever this thing you're trying to hold on to psychologically. So that's what constipation medications do. Again, they're good to take when you haven't gone to the bathroom for 3 or 5 days, but we need to address this conflict to get the brain to tell the gut muscles to do the proper thing. And stimulants. Now, most of your Crohn's medications are going to be stimulants. So think about it. You could have something like coffee, which raises your autonomic nervous system. And then you could have something like lavender tea. I don't even know if that's a tea, or chamomile tea, which it helps you relax and brings the nervous system down. Now, when the nervous system is down, that is when the healing symptoms are going to be the most intense. Most people, they experience their flares, at night and in the early mornings, because that's when the nervous system is at its lowest. So the healing symptoms are at its highest. So essentially, these immunosuppressants and the biologics and the anti-inflammatory drugs and the painkillers, if you go get a painkiller at the store, they're going to have a lot of caffeine in them, a lot of these. But all of these drugs, they make them sound like they're cutting edge and they're new and they do this and that. No, they are literally just different flavor of stimulants. So all they can possibly do is slowly take off the symptoms. I've been on immunosuppressants, biologics, and anti-inflammatory drugs, and they did, I'm telling you, they did absolutely nothing for my Crohn's symptoms. I was on some of them for over a year. They did nothing whatsoever for my symptoms. And I've gotten that report from many other people. And they also come with side effects. So things like, because it's a stimulant, so most diseases, they are going to have symptoms most of them have symptoms in the healing phase, but there are a handful that have symptoms in the conflict active phase. So I'm not saying it 100% of the time causes hair loss, but if you're someone who's prone to dandruff and prone to hair loss in the first place, it's going to make it worse. I'm not saying it causes eczema and flaky, psoriasis. But if you have it, it's guaranteed, almost guaranteed, going to make it worse. I'm not saying it's going to give you moon face, but if you experienced a refugee conflict, which usually the doctor gives you when he gives you a diagnosis and he tells you you're screwed for the rest of your life, if you experience an existence conflict, a refugee conflict, and your kidney collecting tube, this is advanced German new medicine from Dr. Hammer, your body starts to retain water because it feels like a fish out of water. So it retains water, and it's a conflict active symptom. If you're taking a ton of stimulants, it encourages the kidneys to hold on to more water. And if you're having sleep issues, taking more stimulants is going to make it harder to sleep. It's just common sense. And if you have anal fissures or stomach ulcers or mouth ulcers, stimulants are going to make them unbearable. They are so painful. But those are conflict active symptoms, and the stimulants are going to agitate stomach ulcers, mouth ulcers, and anal fissures. So what are the success rate of these drugs? So this is a very recent study done a few years ago. Up to 50% of patients have no response. 50% have no response, and only 20% get remission. 80% don't achieve remission. Think about how much money and research and brain power goes into making these drugs, and they don't understand the root cause. And if they just look back about, before the 70s and the 50s, Crohn's disease was classified as a psychosomatic disease. And Dr. Hammer proved it in the 80s. It's crazy that they keep trying to perfect something or make something better that will never work. And if they do work, it is because by some miracles that person resolved the conflict naturally, and the conflict isn't constantly off and on. That is the only way that these drugs appear to work. So another drug that doesn't have much success is antidepressants. I think the lab studies say that it has less success than the biologics. But when I say it's caused by a traumatic event, the antidepressants might take the edge off of that traumatic event, but it's still an issue in your life that has not been solved. So it's like somebody's stabbing you in the back. You're like, we need to deal with somebody, attacking us from behind, but I'm just going to take some antidepressants so that knife doesn't just feel as bad and my feelings aren't as hurt that my best friend is, stabbing me in the back. No, we need to address this conflict. So, and antidepressants have a ton of side effects that I'm not even going to get into. So, but the one medication that I do think can do a lot of good for somebody is bile binders. So a lot of people, what was causing the majority of my symptoms with Crohn's disease is my gallbladder dumping bile into my intestines. And this is something my brain dead doctors never investigated. We did stool samples. They weren't like, hey, there's a lot of bile in your stool. Just no logic. So if somebody's gallbladder is in overdrive, if you look in this part of the brain right here, this relay will have activity on it. And usually somebody with bile, they're going to be angry a lot, they're going to be very angry. And this is a territorial anger or an identity conflict. And it just dumps bile into your intestines. And what these bile binders do is it deactivates. Bile's like bleach, it's very irritating. And what it does is it deactivates it so it doesn't irritate your intestines, and your intestines aren't constantly just having diarrhea all the time. And it's just usually it's like a powder you mix with water and you take it once or twice, maybe 3 times a day. But again, even if you're taking bile binders, it's a good idea to get that conflict under control. That's putting your gallbladder in and out of overdrive. So what's the best drugs for Crohn's disease? So in my opinion, if you have bile in your stool, bile binders are by far and away the best, the best medication for Crohn's disease. Like 50% of the people that I see, like they have bile in their stool, and nobody's addressing that whatsoever. These other drugs, like they only should be used, like if you ask me, like short term to put the brakes on the healing symptoms. But the focus, you can't have this idea in your head that if I take the right meds, my Crohn's disease will go away, because this just is not true whatsoever, and the numbers say it. There's people like, oh, you're going to get hurt if you don't take your meds. That's not true whatsoever. It's a 50-50 chance whether you're going to see any improvement at all. And I've seen many people get better without taking drugs. I quit mine. I haven't taken drugs in 10 years and I'm fine. How long before the meds work? It depends on your conflict. They always say, oh, it takes 2 to 3 months for the drugs to kick in. That's usually that's usually how long it takes to get through this phase. This usually takes like a month. It depends on how long the conflict is, but that's, people respond when the conflict's over. And usually it takes 2 or 3 months to have a conflict over resolve naturally if you're lucky. But those of you watching this video, your conflict probably isn't going to resolve naturally anytime soon. It's probably been going on and it's sunk pretty deep into the subconscious. What are the percentage of people that respond to drugs? We've already gone over that. Do I have to take Crohn's drugs forever? I can't, technically answer, give this medical advice for you, but I have seen plenty of people get better without medications. And I've seen plenty of people take medications and get worse. Can I stop taking them if I feel better? That's kind of the same questions. What happens if I don't take any meds? I gave you that answer. I told you exactly what these medications are doing to the body. And this is information you can't really go to with your doctor. They don't understand that this is what the body is actually doing. All they know how to do is make a diagnosis, and to be honest, they're pretty crappy at that, and then prescribe something. That's literally like all, and then do some certain surgeries. That's like really all they're good for. So the way that I help people rewire their brain, their subconscious mind, so it stops putting their gut in and out of overdrive, is with my 13-day protocol. It comes with videos and worksheets to rewire the brain, to find that trauma and deactivate its PTSD triggers that keep putting your gut in and out of overdrive. And the first day of this program is free on my YouTube channel page.